And a lot of times, what looks like suspenders and hard work is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, you have to take those security alerts and decide what you're going to action on them. You have to, make decisions around what you're going to surface to the business. You have to do after actions around whatever you're going to call them, around, stuff that didn't go the way you thought it should.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Identity Jedi Show. Like I said, I've lost track of the episodes and where we are. I don't know, it's episode something, but we got a brand new episode coming up for you. So checking in. Samir, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's a new week, or is it an old week? No, it's a new week, and I feel like I'm getting ready for the Christmas breaks and the vacation days, and I'm just starting to, chill out. My wife tells me all the time I need to chill out, so I'm feeling chill.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I saw this meme that I thought was hilarious. Right, it's beginning to look a lot like we'll catch up after the holiday season, where everything becomes we'll circle back. Yeah, after the holidays, right? Yeah. Definitely, everybody's going to start pushing meetings. It's getting about that time, so it's cool. It's nice. To me, it's officially the holiday season because we're in December. Yeah, I'm just one of those people. Like, I'm not going to start celebrating until we get to December because otherwise, why? But anyway, enough of that. We've got, of course, another special guest coming for you this week on the podcast. Excuse me, I should have grabbed some water and I didn't. I'm excited to talk to this guest and actually talk to her and get her insights on some things. And our prep meeting, I just remember coming out of that meeting like really excited. I was like, she's going to be awesome to talk to. This is the first time I've really got a chance to, second time I've met her because I met her on the prep. You guys didn't see that. Samir and her have a longer history than I do with her, but I'm really interested to have her on the show today and get her thoughts. So let's bring her on. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, hey, Merritt, how are you?
Hi. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. This is Merritt Baer. I'm Field CISO at Lacework. I'm coming to you from Miami, so I'm on Tequesta, Miccosukee, and Creekland, among others. Excited to talk identity and whatever else we want to talk about today. As I mentioned, I'm at Lacework now, which is a cloud security unicorn. I came after 5.5 years at AWS in their deputy CISO shop. And before that, worked for US government in all three branches, have had a little bit of a entrepreneurial bent throughout them and have a law degree by background. So, could be anything today.
All right. We'll save the Amazon therapy session for another episode since all of us have.
Please don't. Yeah, let's not. No one has enough budget for that.
Exactly. Right. We'll spare everybody that. So, glad to have you on. One of the topics I want to jump into, right? We be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about it. So for those of you that live under a rock or haven't been watching this in this industry, right? So Okta had a pretty serious breach a couple of months ago. And when it came out, they made the statement that it only affected like a certain number of their customers. I think 1% was the number they put out there. Well, last week they had to kind of print a little bit of retraction as it comes to find out as they did further investigation. It was pretty much all of their customers that were affected by this. And for those who weren't following.
Yeah, no, they literally said, if I'm remembering right, it was 5%, and then they said 100%.
Okay, so it was 5. Okay, so yeah.
They gave mathematical validation.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, look, that's obviously a big difference between 5 and 100. I'll be honest, I wasn't surprised at that at all, because I was more surprised when they first put the statement that I was like, oh, it only affected this many. And I was like, how could you possibly know that quickly? Like, giving the fact of what it was, right? And so to real quick example, we won't go down the rabbit holes of what the breach was, but basically they compromised the session token and for their support system. So they were able to then get customers' files and be able to see like what those session files were, and then those session files was cookies, all this good stuff, whatever. So basically, whatever you were working with Okta on support and whatever you sent them as in your session, attackers now had access to, which most of the time meant they probably had some admin credentials or some kind of session cookie. So not great. And then the fact that it was every single, all their customers, right? So that's kind of a big deal. So looking at this, let's start in the conversation there. Just kind of what was your guys' take, right? Like when you saw that, and I know me, I just kind of read it and was like, oh, well, another bad day for Okta. Like I'm kind of, hate to say I'm over it, but I kind of am. I'm like, It's just the expectation now. I'm more concerned, like, what are you going to do now? Like, what are the steps you're taking? Because this is starting, unfortunately, to become a pattern for them.
Yeah, I was just going to say that what is the word that people use? I've got Stockholm Syndrome when it comes to Okta, right? I'm just like, I'm expecting Okta to come out with something new in terms of like, oh, we had this incident, right?
Wait, Stockholm Syndrome involves love. Do you love them?
I used to at one point, right? It was so easy.
No, but I mean, I'm not joking. Like, if your metaphor is, I think the term you might use is like jaded or
jaded. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Stockholm Syndrome means that I like being kidnapped and I fell in love with my kidnapper. Yeah. I'm oppressed by them and I do have to use them, but no, I'm not in love with them. You're a good point.
You're a customer and okay.
Yes. So I'm jaded. I've given up hope on them in that sense that they will, kind of, for a company that's as big as them with a team size that they have, I'm just going to call it out. Like, how many times do you kind of, not be completely factual or pretend like you don't know or know and take you months and months, which I totally expect a small company with a team of 5 to struggle with, right? Even when they have support. But this just tells me they don't have a handle on their environment, right? The security team, to be honest. And I just don't know, in Merritt, this is where I want your perspective is, I just don't know if it affects from a customer standpoint because people are kind of, Ping isn't doing great. Microsoft is convoluted, great in some ways and, not in some ways. It's like when we talk about single sign-on, it's almost become like Kleenex, right? Oh, do you use Okta? Like when I talk to customers like, hey, yeah, we're Okta, we're Okta shop. So I don't know how it affects their customers. I want your perspective on that because you worked on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, so just to clarify for listeners, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Samir, but I think what you're saying is it's like Kleenex or Band-Aid where like the brand has become the object itself or like
synonymous, yes.
Itself.
Yep.
I don't hear anyone saying like I'm going to Okta that. So I think, or it's not a noun or a verb in most people's vocabulary.
Well, maybe it'll become that. Maybe it's like I'm going to breach you, so I'm going to Okta you. I don't know.
I mean, maybe after this, but I don't really think so. To be honest, I was curious about the way it was. So one, I see a mismatch and I think this is one of the reasons the SEC is coming after CISOs, is a mismatch in representation of what happened and what actually happened. So I think like it's one thing to be disappointed in a company's security performance. It's another to note that they have a habit of withholding information. And I think those two can be related and often may be related, but they are not the same thing. So I think what you initially described, Samir, was like this impression that there's always like a next hit coming. That's a fair observation. I don't have the same necessarily around Okta. I think, and I'll like put that on ice because I have a separate observation. But the other is just the level of transparency or accuracy about what is happening. And I think that's one of the things that folks are really, regulators are trying to get at, that CISOs struggle with, and that marketing folks or like PR folks often are guilty of trying to, go too little to bat for on transparency. In terms of the actual insecurity, from what I understand, they were session tokens and it was around their customer service desk, for lack of a better, I forgot what to call it, their customer support system. Let me just tell you, as someone who did work at Amazon for many years, like, I am empathetic. It is really hard to deal with demanding folks, whether it's internal folks who are like, yeah, I'm in China, I'm your CEO, and I flew here yesterday, and I need access right now. And like, it might really be. And, or your external facing customers who are like, I need help on this right now. Can you, like, we AWS, pissed off customers who wanted us to get handsy in their environment using their credentials, and we just couldn't or wouldn't do it. And they said, no, I'm asking you to go in and remediate this for me, or I'm asking you. And sometimes, there's varying degrees to which customer support desk can do that. But basically, it's a very friction-filled interaction. And I think it should be because of security, and everything should be logged and monitored. But like, the reality is folks are calling into the customer support desk when they're already mad. And they are, at least presumably, if you're the customer support person, they're a customer. And so, we've lined up the incentives here to be mismatched. And I'm not here to like throw tomatoes at the guy in the stocks. I just think like, sure, I certainly hope that they are doing a lot of after action reports on how this happened, just like the folks who were impacted by it, MGM and other folks like who felt the pain. But do I think that like it's reasonable to have bad days? Yes. Could they have been more transparent earlier? Likely, it seems that would have been right. I'm empathetic, and I'm also with you on the need for more and better and not lazy security.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but see, Lacework's not in the news, right? AWS hasn't been in the news. Well, most of the time.
We all know where's some wood that I can knock on.
Yeah.
I'll work really hard at it. Lacework, has a lean security team, and we try to take insights that we get and externalize them, which always is the right thing to do if you're a security company, and also comes with the need to enforce all the policies that you have. And you are nodding there because that every time you talk to a CISO who's like, well, I have this policy and I have this policy, and you say, do you do it? Like, that's a whole different question. Right. So, you know what I mean? Like, to do things at a high fidelity, at scale, and by scale, I mean not just like internally being able to tolerate requests, but also externally being able to tolerate enterprise scale that your customers may have, and things that look like bad days because of the volume of requests might also just be the day that your customer has a flash sale, or that, you know what I mean? Like, there's ways in which weird behavior, anomalous behavior can look a lot like business unless you know what you're looking for. And so I think triangulating around getting, let's talk a little more about what you're finding in your stuff that alarms on true bad days. And I'm happy to talk about what we see too.
Well, and I think one of the problems is this, right? We turned it into like a zero-sum game, meaning like it's like if you breach, you lost. And I started to tell people, it's like it's kind of more like baseball. Like batting 280, it's actually pretty good. You're only hitting contact 28% of the time. And I was like, that's pretty freaking good. Like 300 is only 30%. And the thing is, we only see this, right? So for every attempt at a breach, right? There's no press release for that. There's no coming out and saying like, hey, guess what we stopped today? Guess you don't see any of that. We just see, well, this is what happened. So we don't know if this is one of one. We don't know if this could have been the 1,000th time this person tried. And in this one, they got one. It's like, all right, so 1 out of 1,000, like, hey, we're actually batting pretty good. And I think that's part of the problem. I think we've always had a PR problem in both security and identity, is that the public doesn't really understand a lot of what we do. People still think of it as kind of like magic and all this stuff or whatever. And it's like, how do we showcase that? Because to your point, Mary, like I call a spade. I'm not, look, I've known enough security folks. I've been, my co-founders run a SOC. Like, I get it. Like, I don't envy those positions. And so we're not here to be like, oh, you guys did it again, beat up on them and they didn't do the right thing. It's like, no, this is a hard job. Like it's constantly changing, it's constantly moving. But in this case, it's like, it's the pattern. Like the one thing we can do as an industry is, one, hold each other accountable, like lift each other up always, but also hold each other accountable. Is like, hey, like, okay, got to get better. There's some things here that we're seeing. Like, so how do we get better? What are you guys doing? And so I at least do like the fact that, and we'll see how much it changes, but like they made the next announcement that they're halting all like products, announcements for the next 90 days, doing a, focus on security, all this stuff, whatever. Again, that's the press release that's coming out. Here's what we're going to do. Like everybody has to see, we adopted this nature and society of like, oh, there's got to be this whole huge mea culpa and we got to do it in front of everybody and say, oh, we're going to do this and all these things or whatever. It's like, all right, cool. But how about you actually go and do it? And let's see what steps they're taking. And it'd be nice to see to an extent, what they found. Like if they take this next, I call it like their little 90-day security sprint, share some of that to the extent that they can. Hey, here's what we put in place. Like I will continue I love what Beyond Trust did, right? When they exposed like, hey, like we were one of the customers and here's what we saw and here's the attack vector. And they released everything that they saw. Like, here's how we stopped it. Here's what we think this was and this was. I'm like, that's the only way all of us are going to get better. I think we got to get past the shame of like, oh my God, we got breaches. Like, well, yeah, like this is the game that we're playing. Yeah. Right. Like,
I agree with you, David. I think we talked about this in one of the podcast series. One of the things that did come to my mind was like, man, do these guys have too much time on their hand? Are they documenting the heck? Are they showing off now? Are they showing that they got really good SecOps people? But I see your point. I actually want to work with Beyond Trust because of what they did.
Yeah.
I agree with that. That level of transparency is amazing. I think when Okta had their last breach, they had this, with the CEO Todd and the CISO, they had this like back and forth. This happened, that happened. But dude, I'm not looking for a talk show host, right? I'm looking for real valuable information that you can help us become better, because Okta now is no longer an identity company. It's an identity and security company. So it just felt a little bit of like, we're going to have this dog and pony show versus actually give you details. So I'm 100% with you. I'm waiting for Merritt to tear me down again and tell me that I'm having my Stockholm Syndrome moment.
I don't know. How much do you love them?
When you have only one to love, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. At its heart, I think one of the things that you are describing is why you got into identity as an area that you're building a company in the first place, which is that it feels so central because it is, that it feels almost undivorceable. Like you have to, by the time you've accessed anything, you've gone through some form of identity validation. And if you hadn't, then that's a statement in itself. So, but these days, like, no matter what, whether you turn on a phone and, have programmed it to be passwordless or not, like that was a decision too. So like everything you do goes through some form of identity centric decision. And that is usually scripted by, lowercase, not codified, sure, but also just like it is determined by a set of programmatic decisions that folks have given you some options within, and some of which are not yours to choose. And so I think one of the reasons that this felt so violative is that it's sort of like the Equifax breach from a couple of years ago, that it was like, I don't even know that I really, really chose to do business with these folks. You know what I mean? It was like part of me getting access to my apps was going through them. And now I feel like I've got a vendor implanted in ways that I hadn't felt until they hurt me. And I think that hurt is a genuine reaction that folks feel when they don't get the security that they were hoping or expecting, or even like quietly inheriting when they accessed other things. And I think that's just part of the beauty and the horror of working in identity. It's a sticky area, and folks like stay married to, maybe this is where Stockholm Syndrome is appropriate. Although I learned recently that term was never a real term. It was like invented. I'll tell you. We'll talk about it after the
show. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the industry as a whole, right? As we come towards the end of the year, but by the time this gets out, it'll probably actually be closer to the holidays. What are some things as we look at this past year that we've seen, and looking forward into 24? And so, Merritt, we'll start with you. What are some things that you want to see change in just the security, like either the way we talk about a certain thing, or like vendors, to do, or even, customers ask about, like, what's something you're seeing that's like, what, I saw a lot of this, and I hope next year we do a better job of this thing.
So I think that there's obviously some industry trends that are happening around substantive changes. So I think we'll continue to see a rise in passwordless. I think like whatever that means to people is also a topic that we could spend a while on. But I think, triangulation around identity data as an alternative to a simple form password. I think we will continue to see, the search for, like, what people are calling AI a lot these days is actually triangulation of data, which has been around as a concept for a long time. So we'll continue to see the search for, attack path analysis, which is something that Lacework does, for example, or for identity permission pruning and other things that folks can do, given that everything is an API call in cloud. And even if you're not in cloud, that you can sort of tree, is that a verb? You can telemet your data together to decide whether this is something that you should be noting or not as an anomaly, thinking, but I also think there's, any security person is also thinking about the converse, which is what's on the agenda of bad actors. So like threats and, which CVEs to care about rather than all of them. You'll get vendors out there who will give you a laundry list of CVEs. It's not super actionable. Anyway, these are all things that I'm seeing on the substantive side as trends, which are things that folks can use to prune permissions, limit what they need to pay attention to, and ticket those and turn them into actionable things. On those, like, I don't know, scorecard for 2024 for CISOs, I think it's just always the same good stuff. It's like getting your muscle groups better. So your vendors should help give you the right tools to be able to do better actions, but like there's no one's going to do it for you.
Right.
And a lot of times, what looks like suspenders and hard work is what it is. You know what I mean? Like you have to take those security alerts and decide what you're going to action on them. You have to, make decisions around what you're going to surface to the business. You have to do after actions around whatever you're going to call them, around, stuff that didn't go the way you thought it should. And that usually revolves around not just bad days, but just security metrics. So, why did it take us 2 hours to notice this? Who came up with the threshold of 1,000 dropped calls and not 9,999? Like all of the things that it takes to get it's sort of like the equivalent of having, pharmaceutical approach versus, eating well and working out or whatever. Like you have to do both, but like you can't supplant one for the other rarely. Right. I say, like you've got to still have that kind of like commitment to getting those flywheels going. And that I think will never go out of style.
Yeah, Samir, what about you, man? What are you starting to look ahead at 2024? What are some things you think from an industry perspective that you want to see?
I think Merritt brought up a good point around this whole machine learning data. Was it AI, if you will, that it's really triangulation. It's just giving better data from the more and more data we collect and have, I think, identity becoming a core part of not just IT operations, which is I'm setting up a user and giving them access, but also becoming a core part of identity security and governance is another piece. But I think the big thing for me is consolidation, right? I mean, what I'm hoping for is that more and more companies start looking at this and saying, I don't need to feel secure by having 50 tools. I think if I get a really strong cloud security product, a really strong identity product end to end, and I'm not trying to say that everyone should become a Palo Alto or, a company should only buy a Palo Alto type solution or set of solutions.
No, please don't.
Yeah, I won't. Yeah, but I think it just overhead wise, finding ways to consolidate versus just buying more tools and saying, I'm putting my head in the ground and saying I'm good. That'll be a really good thing.
I concur in part and dissent in part. I agree that like tool consolidation is useful. Like a lot of times I end up talking to CISOs about like, what are you using today? And what are, and what are you buying that for? And, other times though, I think it's dangerous when folks just go on their like, oh, we're already at the buffet. Let's add this to our license when like the company actually isn't good, like feature, not just feature for feature, but like use case for use case. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And I think, that's going to be the interesting thing to see with this go round of consolidation. And I can speak to the identity side of it. I don't know so much about the broader security side of it, but when you start to see more and more, because I think next year we're going to see a lot more platform marketing than we saw this year. We saw a little bit of it this year towards the end of it. I think my prediction is next year that they're all going to say it. Like every identity company is going to brand themselves as an identity security platform. I fucking guarantee that. Like if they haven't already changed it now, they will do that. But what it's going to come down to,
they're going to put AI before it.
I got to read that back. Oh my God. They did that to everything. Marketers are going to never listen to this podcast. They're going to hate me so much. I pick on them so many times. But I think with that though, like, are they going to get better at showing these use cases and showing out the value of all the different parts of their platform? Which that was one of the things that when we saw this last, 20 years ago, right when this happened, but the technology was different. you just got a list of features. We're going to do everything. We're going to do all these things, right? The reality is we're probably going to do 4 of these things really, really well. And the other 20, like, it's just in there, right? And so I think for customers coming in this year, what I would like to see from vendors is, one, as you roll out this platform, like, okay, this is what we're going to do in this area, and detail your use cases there. And I know the product marketers aren't going to allow them to do this because they're going to want to make it seem like they can do everything very well. But I think that's going to be hard to pull off because I think our customers are a lot smarter than they were 2 decades ago, right? They're going to ask, tougher questions around like, well, what am I getting over this? What am I getting here? What am I getting there? And I would like to see a lot more story and use case telling in 24 with these vendors. Okay, you got a consolidated platform. Great. Tell me about what this is. Don't like make up new things. Here's this new platform. We're going to rebrand it something, even though it's something you already have, but we're just going to call it something new. Like, let's get into what are you solving with these problems? Here's how we're going to solve, third party identity and integrate it into your use case. And here's the features that do that. And I think that only comes from, practitioners, some of the customers kind of calling out the vendors and doing that and helping these customers ask those smart questions and going through there. Because otherwise, they'll do the Microsoft thing, right? Which is like, here's the package, here's the bundle, and we'll just throw it in there. Like, you're already at E2, like, what's another $10 for E5? And you get all this other stuff. And it's like, am I going to use any of this stuff? But like, when I look at the pricing, it just makes sense. Okay, I'll go grab it. And that's not a dig at Microsoft directly, but just that right. General path of like, there's so much there that you just package it up and the customer's just like, okay, now they just see value, right? Like, whatever. I got 10 other tools.
They're at the buffet. Yeah, that's what I was describing is like,
yep.
On the one hand, I do anticipate vendor consolidation, and we're anticipating that. And that's why, we now have static code analysis and we have SAST. I mean, like, we're doing like more and better across the spectrum of like, code to cloud, of like everything a dev starts writing through, infrastructure as code and other, trying to be more comprehensive and also more intuitive for folks to use, which I think, everyone's asking for. On the other hand, the folks who sort of win at licensing deals are ones who win at licensing deals, not usually on the merits.
Right.
So, I think there's danger there too. So I think that, we'll see some of those refinements happen over the next year, especially now that money isn't free. I mean, it was never free. We just pretended. But, folks are going to have a moment where they figure out what their core product is. And also like, you have to not just, so I don't know that that security companies solve problems for folks. I think they genuinely get them better at how to approach them. There's never going to be a moment where we're like, well, work done. Yep. Problem solved,
Actually, that is a fantastic point. Yeah, no, that is a fantastic point. And I think, and you're right. Like, I think as an industry, we have to get comfortable like using that vocabulary. And I know marketers would never go for this right now. Like, it would take some real coaxing, but it's like, we all want our products. This is it. This is what you need. It's gonna do all these things, but we all know it's not. Like, Merritt, to your point, it's like, yeah, like here, it's gonna help you do all these things, but you still have to do some work, and then you still have to know what to do with it. Like, it's not. I mean,
I made a policy at work a long time ago not to lie to people, so it's one of the reasons people take my calls. But it also ends up being that like you can tell the truth, and it's more important. Right. Like the point isn't that we make promises that are overarching. The point is that even like smart, mature shops work at this. They just work at different stuff. So let's talk about AI. Like, folks are using it in mature shops, and they're using it to refine the problems that they make humans look at. They're using it to refine the way that they, architect something that feels more evergreen so that you can vend environments that stay within fewer, snowflakes of like novel or exception policies. They're using it to, there's a lot of things that computers are good at and that we can embrace. It doesn't mean that, the robots are taking over. It just means that hopefully we grow up as a security community and that identity and security become something that feels less and less manual. And I don't mean manual just like a human has to do it, but also you notice it, like really,
Right.
really beautiful security. Like think about like the way that you interact with, API calls. Like they just go over the open internet, protected by no inherent trust, except SIG-v4. Like there is this. So when people come at you with like, zero trust, it's like, actually, what we're really talking about is openness with some protections, the kinds that we can allow to make things work at scale. That's what we're all chasing. And it takes some work, but we also get better at it.
Not that W word again. I'm trying to make everybody have jobs and work and stuff.
The work.
About Christmas or something. I don't know.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up here. Any final thoughts, Samir?
Too much work for Dave over here.
Listen, I don't like that word. I'm just kidding. I do, but that's all I do is work.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I've started a whole new segment around marketing. And if marketing people are spoiling the industry to some extent, but then I'm sitting on a cyber marketing panel next week, so I don't want to say that. I think marketing has its place. I think Merritt's right. My thought is you build trust, right? And she's built trust with the community, and people turn to her for advice, and she'll say, this is what we do well, this is what we don't do well, right? And this is what we're working on, and we'll get there. If you want to partner with us, you can, right? So I think there's ways to get your customers engaged, keep them engaged over the long term without having to lie. And I think this whole conversation started with transparency and Okta, right? I think in general, we just need a more transparent, better way of working. And, we had somebody on the podcast the last time, David, who's a potential competitor to Balkan ID, right? But I just see we're all trying to solve the same problems, and there's companies that have made a lot of money, not adding a lot of value, and we all want to disrupt, right? But yeah, like I said, that could be a whole new segment with Merritt.
Yeah, sounds good. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, we want.
Look, for folks listening, get in the water is warm. It's a really interesting and worthwhile issue to make the secure thing to do the easy thing to do. And that's always what identity providers and protectors are hoping for, is to do those paved roads in ways that you don't even observe that you're driving on. And, that takes work. And I know I keep using that word, but we observe it because we're the folks in the arena, like that's the good fight.
Absolutely. Listen, we're not afraid of work here. It's okay. We can say the word. This is all me and Samir do. I don't even know what anti-work is anymore.
Yeah.
No, but just listen, Merritt, this was great. Thanks so much for taking the time. I know we had some scheduling issues, but we finally got it on. We got it done.
We're here now. That's all that matters. Yeah. Thanks, folks. You can find me on Twitter at Merritt Baer, or in the world. If you Google me, it's not that hard. So thanks for having me, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, folks, that's it for the Identity Jedi Show podcast. You guys know what it is. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also check us out on YouTube at The Identity Jedi. You can see all of these on there, as well as don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter, theidentityjedi.com. You get all the latest identity access management news in your inbox every Wednesday at some point, because it just depends on when I feel like sending it. You guys know what it is. Until the next time, be good to each other, be kind to each other, love each other. See you guys.
Bye.